last topic that I'll just touch on briefly is we think about some of these different voice and integration scenarios for consideration. Then is to also equally important to note what does this mean from a device perspective in consideration. So the key here is we think about teams just like you will identify upfront either based on geography, locale, even specific to the user or group of users, a persona of sorts to really identify how they use voice services today. Supporting that is equally important to ensure that you've got a device strategy aligned to each of those unique type of personas as well. And the great thing there is we think about Teams Voice. Similarly, we have lots of flexibility and choice where we actually will see most organizations will lead with users using a headset. They may further have a combination with a mobile device as well. But then for specific scenarios, either in terms of like common area phones, or maybe it's a boss executive scenario instead, or maybe in the case it's an assistant in that light, then that may dictate a specific type of desk epiphone that is deployed instead. And then equally important, more just from the user perspective, is taking into those considerations with what that means in terms of workspaces as well. So as you think about collaboration spaces, conference rooms, huddle spaces, as you kind of categorize small, medium, large, again, based on that persona, based on the size requirements, how that may differentiate. Do we provide just a traditional conference room in that particular space? Do we further maybe extend that to a Teams room system and or in combination, with a Surface Hub instead? So again, more than just the consideration planning aspects from the user perspective as the core consideration for voice, equally important is the considerations as it applies to personal devices, but also the shared or workspaces scenarios to follow. And then last but not least is also considerations through capabilities that we can also support through another option you have available we refer to as SIP Gateway. And so what's really great about this is if you happen to have an existing investment of desk conference room phones, maybe it's analog ATA devices or even DEC considerations instead, as long as it's one of the partners models that have been certified, you can actually reflash those devices with an OpenSIP firmware. You can then leverage those devices to directly register to the SIP gateway and then leverage that endpoint to provide a core set of calling capabilities for placing and receiving calls instead. So again, we do see this also as a common scenario, one for customers to further maximize that ROI, maybe in devices that they may have procured prior, but then also to just maybe more of those core common scenarios where that type of device can be better fit instead. And with that, I think that is my last slide regarding Teams voice scenarios and integration considerations.
Very good. We did get a couple questions. I think we're going to try to answer those about call queues and auto attendance. But there looks like there was about, love this one, personal phones on tenant where conditional access is implemented and rolling Teams phones is a challenge. Yeah, how to manage those Teams personal use phones, not the common area phones, right? Those types of things versus somebody who is just connecting it in and going from there.
Yes, yeah. There to your point, Donna, and the person that posted the question, there are definitely some key considerations that working with the network, the security, and the operational teams that manage into and conditional access, you definitely want to account for up front for those unique scenario requirements instead. The thing that's also interesting too is we often see in some cases is where it may get confused where the conditional access and interior requirements that we need for native Teams phone devices get intermingled with what that applies to the traditional mobile device instead. And really, because we leverage Android as an operating system in that light. But the important thing to note is there are definitely two unique, separate use case scenarios, and each need to be equally, accounted for, planned with upfront.
Perfect.